What if a company had more power over your life than your own government? Not in the future, but right now. Every message you send, every search you make, and every place you go leaves a trace. Over time, those traces build into something much bigger, a detailed digital version of you. It reflects what you like, what you ignore, how you behave, and even how long you hesitate before making a decision. This version of you is not just sitting somewhere unused. It is constantly being collected, stored, and studied. Not by your country, and not by a system designed to protect you, but by corporations operating across the world. While you were going about your daily life, something important changed. The world you think you understand, the one defined by borders, governments, and laws, is no longer the only system shaping your reality. A new kind of territory has emerged. Not land, not oceans, not airspace, but data. Your data. And the companies collecting it are no longer just businesses competing for profit. They are becoming systems of power operating on a global scale, something closer to empires, but without borders and without visibility. So now the question is no longer abstract. It is personal. Who owns your data? To understand what is happening today, we need to look at how power worked in the past. For most of human history, power came from land. Empires expanded by taking territory, drawing borders, and controlling resources that people depended on to survive. Gold provided wealth, oil provided energy, and land provided food and stability. If you controlled these resources, you controlled entire populations. You could influence economies, shape societies, and decide the future of regions. This system of control became known as colonialism, and it defined how power was built and maintained for centuries. But colonialism was not just about geography. It was about controlling systems, economic systems, political systems, and social systems. It was about controlling how people lived and what choices were available to them. Even today, many of the structures that shape our world still come from that era. However, something fundamental has changed. Power is no longer limited to physical territory. It no longer requires land to exist. A new form of power has emerged, and it operates in a completely different way. Today, the most valuable resource on Earth is not oil, and it is not land. It is data. Not just information stored in files, but detailed information about human behavior. What people search for, what they watch, what they click on, where they go, who they interact with, and how they spend their time. Every action creates a signal, and while each signal may seem small on its own, when billions of these signals are collected and combined, they form patterns. These patterns reveal how people think, how they act, and how they make decisions. Once these patterns are understood, something powerful becomes possible. Prediction. Companies can begin to understand not just what you did in the past, but what you are likely to do next. What you might click, what might hold your attention, and what decisions you are likely to make. And if behavior can be predicted, it can also be influenced. Not in an obvious or aggressive way, but gradually and quietly. This is where data stops being just information and becomes a tool of power. A small number of companies now sit at the center of this new system. They control the platforms that billions of people use every day. Search engines that answer questions, social networks that shape conversations, and digital platforms that deliver news, entertainment, and information. These platforms are not just tools that people use occasionally. They are environments where people spend a large part of their time interacting, learning, reacting, and making decisions. Unlike governments, these systems are not limited by borders. They operate across countries, across legal systems, and across cultures. The same platform can influence people in completely different parts of the world at the same time. This creates a new form of power that does not rely on land or territory. It is power without borders, power without physical presence, and power that can reach billions of people instantly. In many ways, these systems function like modern empires, but they are invisible and much harder to define. We still think of the world as a map of countries with clear borders and defined territories. But there is another map now, one that you cannot see. A map made of data flows, digital platforms, and global networks. This map does not follow geography. It follows connection. A person in one country can be influenced by a system built in another country, stored in another, and controlled from somewhere else entirely. This breaks the traditional idea of sovereignty and control. In this new system, power is no longer tied to location. It is tied to access, to systems, and to data. Control is no longer about owning land, but about controlling the networks that people depend on. And these networks are now deeply embedded in everyday life. They shape how people communicate, how they learn, how they work, and how they make decisions. This invisible map is becoming just as important, if not more important, than the physical one. Governments still make laws and define borders, but these digital systems operate differently. They shape behavior directly. They influence what information people see, what spreads quickly, and what disappears before most people even notice it. In many cases, these companies understand their users better than governments do. They know habits, routines, and preferences, not because people tell them directly, but because people reveal it through their actions every day. This creates a shift in power. From systems that control people through laws and borders, to systems that influence people through information and behavior. And because this influence is not always visible, it is much harder to recognize. It does not feel like control. It feels like normal use, like everyday life. Like choice. This is the shift we are living through. From visible power to invisible power. From physical control to informational control. From nations to networks. The more data a system collects, the more accurate it becomes. The more accurate it becomes, the more influence it gains. And the more influence it gains, the harder it is to see. Because it does not feel like something external controlling you. It feels like something designed for you. Something convenient. Something personalized. Something that fits your preferences. But underneath that experience, there is a system constantly learning, adjusting, and improving its ability to guide behavior. And over time, that guidance becomes more effective. But this leads to a much bigger question. If these systems are this powerful, how are they actually being used? How do they shape what you see, what you think, and what you believe without you even noticing it. Because collecting data is only the first step. The real power comes from how that data is used. And that is where things become far more complex and far more concerning. How they control you. You think you choose what you see online, but in reality, most of what appears in front of you has already been selected before you even open the app. Every post, every video, every recommendation is filtered through a system that decides what is most likely to keep your attention. What you are seeing is not the full internet, but a version of it built from your behavior, shaped by your past actions, and designed to keep you engaged for as long as possible. This does not happen randomly, and it is not neutral. It is the result of a system that has been trained using your data. At the center of this system are algorithms, which act as decision makers that operate constantly in the background. Every time you open an app, thousands of decisions are made in a fraction of a second. What content appears first, what is delayed, what is hidden, and what is pushed forward. You do not see everything that exists on the platform. You see what the system has chosen to show you. Over time, this selection process becomes consistent, and what you see begins to feel like a complete and accurate picture of reality, even though it is only a filtered version. Your attention is one of the most valuable things in this system. You only have a limited amount of time and focus each day, and platforms compete for it. The longer you stay, the more data you create. The more data you create, the more the system learns about you. And the more it learns, the better it becomes at holding your attention. This creates a cycle where the system continuously improves its ability to keep you engaged. Every scroll, every pause, and every interaction is measured and used to refine this process. The system does not simply show you content, it adapts to you. Every action you take becomes input. When you watch something, the system records it. When you pause, it notices. When you skip, it adjusts. Based on this information, it shows you more of what it believes you will respond to. Over time, this creates a feedback loop where your behavior shapes the content you see, and the content you see shapes your behavior. This process is gradual and often invisible, but it becomes more powerful the longer you remain inside the system. As this process continues, it begins to shape your perception of the world. What you see more often starts to feel normal and common. What you rarely see begins to feel distant or unimportant. Certain ideas appear to be widely accepted, while others seem to disappear completely. The system does not directly tell you what to think, but by controlling what you are exposed to, it influences how you think. Over time, repeated exposure creates familiarity, and familiarity can shape belief. Now imagine this system operating across millions of people at the same time. Entire populations experiencing slightly different versions of reality, shaped by the same underlying systems. People in different places may see different information, different priorities, and different perspectives, even when they are using the same platform. This creates influence at a global scale, not through force, but through design. It is continuous, subtle, and difficult to detect from within the system itself. Governments still attempt to regulate these systems, but they face significant challenges. These platforms operate across borders and change rapidly, often faster than laws can keep up. They are used by billions of people every day, making them deeply embedded in daily life. This raises an important question. When systems operate beyond borders and influence behavior directly, who is truly in control? Is it the government that creates laws, or the platform that shapes how people think and act? The most powerful aspect of this system is that it does not feel like control. There are no clear signs, no warnings, and no obvious moment where influence begins. Instead, it feels like convenience. It feels like personalization. It feels like a system designed to make things easier for you. But underneath that experience, the system is constantly learning, adjusting, and guiding. Over time, this quiet influence can shape how people think, what they believe, and what they accept as normal. So now we return to the question: who owns your data? Because if someone controls your data, they understand your behavior. And if they understand your behavior, they can influence your decisions. And if they influence your decisions, they shape your reality. In this system, ownership is not just about information. It is about influence and ultimately power. And if that is true, then the real question is no longer just who owns your data, but whether you still control your own choices. If you enjoyed this exploration into the hidden forces shaping our world, make sure you subscribe to the channel and join us for more great documentaries still to come.